The 33 sermons on Nibbāna were delivered by the Venerable Bhikkhu Kaṭukurunde Ñāṇananda in Sinhala at Mitrigala Nissaranavanaya Forest Hermitage. They were translated into English by the same Venerable monk, presently residing at Potkulkala Forest Hermitage in Kandagedara, Devalagam.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Etang santang etang panitang yadidang sabba sankhara samato sabbopadhipati nissaggo Annakkhyo virago nirodho Nibbāna. This is peaceful, this is excellent, namely the stilling of all preparations, the relinquishment of all assets, the destruction of craving, detachment, cessation, extinction. With the permission of the most venerable great preceptor and the assembly of the venerable meditative monks, this is the 14th sermon in the series of sermons on Nibbāna. In our last sermon, we gave a description of the forms of imaginings or methinkings which the Buddha had compared to an extremely subtle bondage of Mara. The Yavakalapi Sutta of the Salayatana Samyutta in the Samyutta Nikaya has shown us that all kinds of thoughts concerning existence that stem from this subtle conceit asmimana, are mere imaginings or methinkings, and that they are called a bondage of Mara, because they have the power to keep beings shackled to existence. We have seen how they follow a dichotomy, even like the dilemma posed by the fivefold bondage of Vepachitti, the king of demons. Whether one thinks, I shall be or I shall not be, one is in bondage to Mara. Whether one thinks, I shall be percipient or I shall be non-percipient or I shall be neither percipient nor non-percipient, one is still in bondage to Mara. There is a dichotomy involved here. The fact that these imaginings, which follow a dichotomy, must be transcended completely, as well as the way to transcend them, has been preached by the Buddha to Venerable Pukkasati in the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya. There is a pithy passage forming the grand finale of this discourse, in which the Buddha gives a resume. We propose to quote this passage at the very outset, as it scintillates with the majestic fervour of the Dhamma. Yatthitang manyussava nappavatanti manyussave khopana nappavatamani muni santoti vuchatiti iti khopanetang buttang kincetang paticca buttang asmiti bhikkhu manyita metang ayamahamasmiti manyita metang bhavissanti manyita metang na bhavissanti manyita metang rupi bhavissanti manyita metang arupi bhavissanti manyita metang sanye bhavissanti manyita metang asanyi bhavissanti manyita metang nivasanyi nasanyi bhavissanti manyita metang manyitang bhikkhu rogo manyitang gando manyitang sallang sabba manyitanang tveva bhikkhu samatikkama muni santoti bucchati muni khopana bhikkhu santo na jayati na jiyati na miyati na kuppati na piheti tampisa bhikkhu natti yena jayethe ajayamano king jiyissati ajiyamano king miyissati amiyamano king kuppissati akuppamano kissa pihissati yatthitang manyussava nappavatanti manyussave khopana nappavatamani muni santoti vucchati iti yang tang buttang idametang paticca buttang. In the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta, we find the Buddha presenting some points as the theme and gradually developing it, analyzing, clarifying, and expatiating as the discourse proceeds. The opening sentence in the above paragraph is a quotation of a part of that original statement of the Buddha which forms the theme. Here is the rendering. steadied whereon the tides of imaginings no longer occur in him. And when the tides of imaginings occur no more in him, he is called a sage stilled. So it was said, and with reference to what was this said? Am monk is something imagined. I am this is something imagined. I shall be is something imagined. I shall not be is something imagined. I shall be possessed of form is something imagined. I shall be formless is something imagined. I shall be percipient is something imagined. I shall be non-percipient is something imagined. I shall be neither percipient nor non-percipient is something imagined. The imagined is a disease. The imagined is an abscess. The imagined is a dart. It is with the surmounting of all what is imagined, monk, that a sage is called stilled. The sage who is stilled is not born, nor does he age, nor does he die, nor is he shaken, and he has no longing. Even that is not in him whereby he might be born. Not being born, how shall he age? Not aging, how shall he die? Not dying, how shall he be shaken? Being unshaken, what shall he long for? So it was with reference to this that it was said, steadied whereon the tides of imaginings no longer occur in him, he is called a sage stilled. All this goes to show how relevant the question of imaginings is to the path leading to Nibbāna. This pithy passage, which brings the discourse to a climax, portrays how the sage is at peace when his mind is released by stemming the tides of imaginings. He attains release from birth, decay and death, here and now, because he has realized the cessation of existence in this very world. It is in this light that we have to interpret the above statement. Even that is not in him whereby he might be born. Dependent on existence is birth. Due to whatever postulate of existence one can speak of a birth, even that existence is not in him. Not being born, how can he age? How can he grow old or decay? This is because of the implicit interrelation between conditions. Here we can flash back to our analogy of a tree mentioned earlier. In order to explain the mutual interrelation between the concepts of birth, decay and death, we brought up a simile which however is not canonical. That is to say, supposing there is some kind of tree, the buds, the leaves, the flowers, the fruits and the wood of which could be sold for making one's livelihood. If 5 men trading in each of those items respectively are made to line up at some particular stage in the growth of a tree and asked whether the tree is too young or too old, the answers given might differ according to the individual standpoint grasped in each case. It turns out to be a difference of viewpoint. For instance, the man who makes his living by selling the buds would reply that the tree is too old when the buds turn into leaves. Similarly, when it is the season for the leaves to fall and the flowers to bloom, one who trades in leaves might say that the tree is too old. And when flowers turn into fruits, the florist's viewpoint would be similar. In this way, one can understand how this concept changes according to what one grasps, that there is an implicit relativity about it. Now, as for this sage, he has given up everything that he had grasped. Grasping has been given up completely. Imagining too has been abandoned. Hence, Not being born, how shall he age? The sage has no postulate of existence. Since there is no existence, there is no birth. Because there is no birth, there is no decay. It is a well-known fact that the term jara implies both growth and decay. It is after setting a limit that we speak of a process of decay after growth. This limit, however, varies according to our individual standpoint grasped, according to our point of view. That is what we have tried to illustrate by this analogy. Then we have the statement, not aging, how shall he die? Since decay is an approach to death, where there is no decay, there is no death. The fact that there is no death, we have already seen in our exposition of the significance of the verses quoted above from Adhimutta Theragatha. When the bandits got round to kill the Venerable Adhimutta, he declared, Nami hoti ahosinti bhavissanti na hoti me sankhara vibhavissanti tatthaka paridevana. It does not occur to me, I was, nor does it occur to me, I shall be. Mere preparations will get destroyed. What is there to lament? This declaration exemplifies the above statement. When all graspings are given up, there is no decay or death. Amiyamano kinkuppisati. Not dying, how shall he be shaken? The word kuppati does not necessarily mean getting annoyed. Here it means to be shaken up or moved. When one holds on to a standpoint, one gets shaken up if someone else tries to dislodge him from that standpoint. The deliverance in Nibbāna is called akuppaceto vimutti, the unshakable deliverance of the mind. All other deliverances of the mind known to the world are shakeable, kuppa. They are unsteady. They shake before the pain of death. Only Nibbāna is called akuppaceto vimutti, the unshakable deliverance of the mind. So this peaceful sage, the Arahant, established in that concentration of the fruit of Arahantship, Arahatta Phala Samadhi, which is known as the influx-free deliverance of the mind, Anasava Ceto Vimutti, and is endowed with the wisdom proper to Arahantship, Paññā Vimutti, deliverance through wisdom, is unshaken before death. His mind remains unshaken. That is why the Arahant Thera Venerable Adhimutta fearlessly made the above declaration to the bandits. Now as to the significance of the Buddha's statement, Amiyamano kinkuppisati uppamano kissapihissati, not dying, how shall he be shaken, and being unshaken, what shall he long for? When there is no shock, no agitation or trembling, what does one long for? Piha means longing, desiring for something or other. In this context, it refers to that longing which arises at the moment of death in one who has not destroyed craving. It is as a consequence of that longing that he enters some form of existence according to his karma. That longing is not there in this sage for the simple reason that he is unshaken before death. He has nothing to look forward to, no desires or longings. Akuppamano kissapihessati. Being unshaken, what shall he long for? It is obvious, therefore, that the concepts of birth, decay and death become meaningless to this sage. That is precisely why he is at peace, having transcended all imaginings. All this goes to show that Nibbāna is a state beyond decay and death. We can clearly understand from this discourse why Nibbāna is known as a decayless, deathless state, realizable in this very world. That sage has conquered decay and death here and now, because he has realized the cessation of existence here and now. This is something extremely wonderful about the Arahant. He realizes the cessation of existence in his attainment to the fruit of Arahanthood. How does he come to realize the cessation of existence? Craving is extinct in him, hence there is no grasping. Where there is no grasping, there is no existence. Precisely because there is no existence, birth, decay and death, along with sorrow and lamentation, cease altogether. From the foregoing we could well infer that all those concepts like birth, decay, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief and despair come about as a result of a heap of pervert perceptions, pervert thoughts and pervert views based on the conceit of an existence, the conceit M. The three kinds of perversions known as Sanya Vipallasa, Chitta Vipallasa and Dittha Vipallasa give rise to a mass of concepts of an imaginary nature. The entire mass of suffering summed up by the terms birth, decay, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief and despair are basically of a mental origin. For an illustration of this fact, we can go back to our analogy of winding some strands into a rope mentioned earlier. We pointed out that in the case of some strands that are being mistakenly wound in the same direction, it is the grasp in the middle that gives at least the semblance of a rope to it. So long as there is no such grasping, the strands do not become knotty or tense as they go round and round. It is only when someone grasps it in the middle that the strands begin to get winded up, knotty and tense. What is called existence or becoming, bhava, follows the same norm. True to the law of impermanence, everything in the world changes. But there is something innocent in this change. Impermanence is innocuous in itself. We say it is innocuous because it means no harm to anyone. It is simply the nature of this world, the suchness, the norm. It can do us harm only when we grasp, just as in the case of that quasi-rope. The tenseness between winding and unwinding arising out of that grasp in the middle is comparable to what is called bhava sankhara, preparations for existence. Sankhara or preparations are said to be dependent on avidya or ignorance. Now we can form an idea of the relationship between these two even from this analogy of the rope. The grasp in the middle creates two ends giving rise to a dilemma. In the case of existence too, grasping leads to an antinomian conflict. To become a thing is to disintegrate into another thing. On a previous occasion, we happened to discuss the significance of the term Ñāṇananda, me-thinking or imagining, with reference to the verse Yena yena hi maññanti tato tang hoti anyatha, etc. Ñāṇana itself gives rise to a thing which from its very inception goes on disintegrating into another thing. Just as much as grasping leads to the concept of two ends, to become a thing is to start changing into another thing. That is, it comes under the sway of the law of impermanence. Illustrations of this norm are sometimes to be met with in the discourses, but their significance is often ignored. The idea of the two ends and the middle sometimes finds expression in the reference to an above, below and across in the middle, uddham, adho, tiriyam, majje, or in the terms before, behind and middle, pure, pacha, majja. Such references deal with some deeper aspects of the Dhamma relating to Nibbāna. As a good illustration, we may take up the following two verses from the Mettagu Manava Pucca in the Parayana Vagga of the Sutta Nippāna. Yankinchi sampajanasi buddhang adho tiriyanchapi macche etesu nandincha nivesanancha panujja viññāṇaṁ bhave natitte. Evaṁ vihari sato appamatto bhikkhu charang hitva mamayitani jati jarang soka pariddavaṁ idheva vidva pajaheya dukkham. Whatever you may know to be above, below and across in the middle, dispel the delight and the tendency to dwell in them. Then your consciousness will not remain in existence. A monk, endowed with understanding, thus dwelling mindful and heedful, as he fares along, giving up all possessions, would abandon even here and now birth, decay, sorrow, lamentation, and suffering. The word idheva, occurring in the second verse, is highly significant in that it means the abandonment of all those things here and now, not leaving it for an existence to come. In the Mahaviyuha Sutta of the Sutta Nippāna also, a similar emphasis is laid on this idea of here and now. About the Arahant, it is said that he has no death or birth here and now. Chutupapato idha yassanati, to whom even here there is no death or birth. In this very world, he has transcended them by making those two concepts meaningless. The word nivesanam, occurring in the first verse, is also significant. It means dwelling. In consciousness, there is a tendency to dwell in. That is why, in some contexts, it is said that form is the abode or dwelling place of consciousness. Rupa dhatu ko gahapati viññānasya oko. The form element householder is the abode of consciousness. The terms oka, niketa and nivesana are synonymous, meaning abode, form or dwelling place. The nature of consciousness in general is to abide or dwell in. That non-manifestative consciousness, anidassana viññāna, however, has got rid of the tendency to abide or dwell in. Now we can revert to the passage in the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta, which speaks of an occurrence of tides of imaginings. The passage actually begins with the words Yatthatitam manyusava nappavattanti, steadied whereon the tides of imaginings occur no more in him. The idea behind this occurrence of tides of imaginings is quite often represented by the concept of asava, influx. Sensuality, kama, existence, bhava, views, ditthi, and ignorance, avidya, are referred to as influxes, asava, or floods, ogha. These are the four kinds of samsaric habits that continuously flow into the minds of beings. The above mentioned sutta passage refers to a place steadied whereon the tides of imaginings do not occur or flow in, a place that is free from their influence. This is none other than Nibbāna, for which one of the epithets used is Deepa or island. Since Nibbāna is called an island, some might take it literally to mean some sort of a place in this world. In fact, this is the general concept of Nibbāna some are prone to uphold in their interpretation of Nibbāna. But why it is called an island is clearly explained for us by a discourse in the Parayana Vagga of the Sutta Nippāna, namely Kappamanava Pucca. In this sutta, the Brahmin youth Kappa poses the following question to the Buddha. Majjhe sarasming tiṭṭhatam oghe jate mahabhaye jara machu paretanam deepam pabruhi marisa tvanca me dīpaṃ akkāhi yathaidam nāparang siya. To them that stand midstream, so said the Venerable Kappa, when the frightful floods flow forth, to them in decay and death fall on, an island, sire, may you proclaim, an island which none else excels. Yeah, such an isle, pray tell me, sire. And this is the Buddha's reply to it. Akinchanang anādānaṃ etang dīpaṃ anāparang Nibbānamiti nang brūmi jara machu parikhyam. Owning not, grasping not, the isle is this, none else besides. Nibbāna, that's how I call that isle, wherein decay is decayed and death is dead. The Buddha's reply makes it clear that the term Nibbāna stands for the extinction of craving and grasping. The ideal of owning not and grasping not is itself Nibbāna, and nothing else. If the term had any other connotation, the Buddha would have mentioned it in this context. It is indubitably clear then that the epithet Dīpaṃ or island has to be understood in a deeper sense when it refers to Nibbāna. It is that owning nothing and grasping nothing that puts an end to decay and death. Though we have yet to finish the discussion of the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta, the stage is already set now to understand the significance of a certain brief discourse in the Udana, which is very often quoted in discussions on Nibbāna. For the facility of understanding, we shall take it up now, as it somehow fits into the context. Athi bhikkhave ajātaṃ abhūtaṃ akataṃ asaṅkhataṃ nocetaṃ bhikkhave abhavisya ajātaṃ abhūtaṃ akataṃ asaṅkhataṃ na idha jātasya bhūtasya katasya saṅkhatasya nissaranaṃ paññāyetha yasmāca kho bhikkhave athi ajātaṃ abhūtaṃ akataṃ asaṅkhataṃ tasmā jātasya bhūtasya katasya saṅkhatasya nissaranaṃ paññāyati. Monks, there is a not born, a not become, a not made, a not compounded. Monks, if that not born, not become, not made, not compounded were not, there would be no stepping out here from what is born, become, made and compounded. But since monks there is a not born, a not become, a not made, a not compounded, therefore there is a stepping out from what is born, become, made, compounded. The terms ajātaṃ, not born, abhūtaṃ, not become, akataṃ, not made, and asaṅkhataṃ, not compounded, are all epithets for Nibbāna. The Buddha declares that if not for this not born, not become, not made, not compounded, there would be no possibility of stepping out or release here, that is in this very world, from the born, the become, the made and the compounded. The second half of the passage rhetorically reiterates and emphasizes the same fact. Now, as to the significance of this profound declaration of the Buddha, we may point out that the terms not born, not become, not made, not compounded suggest the emancipation of the Arahant's mind from birth, becoming and preparations, sankhara. They refer to the cessation of birth, becoming and preparations realized by the Arahant. So then the significance of these terms are purely psychological. But the commentator, the Venerable Dhammapala, pays little attention to the word idha here in this passage, which needs to be emphasized. The fact that there is a possibility here and now of stepping out from the state of born, become, made and compounded surely deserves emphasis, since until then release from decay and death was thought to be possible only in another dimension of existence, that is, after death. The prospect of stepping out from decay and death here and now in this very world has to be asserted for its novelty, which is why the declaration opens with the word Atti, there is. However, most of the scholars who try to interpret this passage in their discussions on Nibbāna, instead of laying stress on the word either, here emphasize the opening word Atti, there is, to prove that Nibbāna is some form of reality absolutely existing somewhere. As that passage from the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta on Maññana, which we discussed, has shown us, the terms ajātaṃ, abhūtaṃ, akatāṃ and asaṅkhatāṃ have to be understood in a deeper sense. Existence is a conceit deep-rooted in the mind, which gives rise to a heap of perverted notions. Its cessation, therefore, has also to be accomplished in the mind and by the mind. This is the gist of the Buddha's exhortation. Let us now come back to the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta to discuss another facet of it. We started our discussion with the grand finale of that discourse because of its relevance to the question of Maññana. However, as a matter of fact, this discourse preached by the Buddha to the Venerable Bhikkhu is an exposition of a systematic path of practice for the emancipation of the mind from imaginings or Maññana. The discourse begins with the declaration, Ca dhāturo ayang bhikkhu puriso. Monk, man as such is a combination of 6 elements. The worldling thinks that a being, satta, Sanskrit sattva, exists at a higher level of reality than inanimate objects. Now what did the Buddha do to explore this concept of a being in his discourse to Venerable Bhikkhu? He literally thrashed out that concept by breaking up this man into his basic elements and defining him as a bundle of 6 elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, space, and consciousness. As the discourse proceeds, he explains it in an extremely lucid manner, how one can detach one's mind from each of these elements. We happen to mention at the very outset that the depth of the Dharma has to be seen through lucidity and not through complicated overdrawings. In fact, this discourse exhibits such a lucidity. The meditation subject of elements, which grew in complexity at the hands of the later Buddhist philosophers, who took to atomistic analysis of a speculative sort, is presented here in this Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta with a refreshing clarity and lucidity. Here it is explained in such a way that one can directly experience it. For instance, in describing the earth element, the Buddha gives as examples of the internal earth element such parts of the body as head hairs, body hairs, nails and teeth. Because the external earth element hardly needs illustrations, nothing in particular has been mentioned as to that aspect. Anyone can easily understand what is meant by it. There is no attempt at atomistic analysis. However, the Buddha draws special attention to a certain first principle of great significance. Ya cheva khopana ajjhattika pathavidhatu, ya cha bahira pathavidhatu, pathavidhatu revesa. Tang netang mama neso hamasmi nameso attati, evametang yatha bhutang sammapanyaya datthappang. Evametang yatha bhutang sammapanyaya disva, pathavidhatuya nibbindati, pathavidhatuya chittang virajeti. That which is the internal earth element and that which is the external earth element, they are both just the earth element itself, and that should be seen as it is with right wisdom. Thus, this is not mine, I am not this is not myself. Having seen thus with right wisdom as it is, he becomes dejected with the earth element. He detaches his mind from the earth element. It is this first principle that is truly important and not any kind of atomic theory. This resolution of the internal-external conflict has in it the secret of stopping the samsaric vortex of reiterated becoming, samsara vata. It is due to the very discrimination between an internal and an external that this samsaric vortex is kept going. Now, in the case of a vortex, what is found inside and outside is simply water. But all the same, there is such a vehement speed and activity and a volley of changes going on there. So it is the case with this man. What is found in his body is the earth element. What is to be found outside is also the earth element. And yet the ordinary person sees quite a wide disparity between the two. Why is that? That is because of the illusory nature of consciousness. We have devoted a number of sermons to explain the relationship between consciousness and name and form. We happen to speak of name and form as a reflection of a self-image. Even as one who comes before a mirror, on seeing his reflection on it, would say, "This is mine, this am I, this is myself," the worldling is in the habit of entertaining cravings, conceits, and views. In fact, the purpose of craving, conceits, and views is to reinforce the distinction between an internal and an external. Already when one says, "This is mine," one discriminates between the this and I, taking them to be separate realities. This am I and this is myself betray the same tacit assumption. Just as by looking at a mirror, one may like or dislike the image appearing on it, these 3 points of view give rise to various pervert notions. All this because of the perpetuation of the distinction between an internal and an external, which is the situation with the ordinary worldling. Since cravings, conceits, and views thus reinforce the dichotomy between an internal and an external, the Buddha has upheld this principle underlying the meditation on the 4 elements to resolve this conflict. The fact that with the resolution of this conflict between the internal and the external concerning the 4 elements, the mind becomes emancipated is put across to us in the following verse in the Thālaputta Thera Gātha. Kaṭukurunde tine latache khandhe imeham amiteche dhamme ajjhattikāne vache bāhirāni che samang tuleyam tadidam kadāme. This verse gives expression to Venerable Thālaputta Thera's aspiration to become an arahant. It says, "When shall I weigh as equal all these limitless things, both internal and external, twigs, grass, creepers, and these aggregates? Oh, when shall that be for me?" It is at the stage of arahanthood that the internal and the external appear alike. That is precisely why the Venerable Adhimutta Thera, whom we quoted earlier, uttered the lines, "Tinakatta samang lokang yada paññāya passati." When one sees through wisdom the world to be comparable to grass and twigs. The comparison is between the internal world of the 5 aggregates or this conscious body and the inanimate objects outside. Just as in the case of the 4 elements earth, water, fire and air, the Buddha pointed out a way of liberating one's mind from the space element with the help of similar illustrations. In explaining the space element too, he gives easily intelligible examples. The internal space element is explained in terms of some apertures in the body that are well known, namely those in the ears, nose, and the mouth. Apart from such instances, he did not speak of any microscopic space element, as in scientific explanations, probably because it is irrelevant. Such an analysis is irrelevant for this kind of reflection. Here we have to bear in mind the fact that perception as such is a mirage. However far one may go on analyzing, form and space are relative to each other like a picture and its background. A picture is viewed against its background, which is relative to it. So also are these two concepts of form and space. Consciousness provides the framework for the entire picture. By way of clarification, we may allude to the pre-Buddhistic attempts of yogins to solve this problem solely through the method of serenity, samatha, ignoring the method of insight, vipassana. The procedure they followed was somewhat on these lines. They would first of all surmount the concept of form or matter through the first four mental absorptions or jhanas. Then as they inclined towards the formless, what confronted them first was space. A very appropriate illustration in this context would be the method of removing the sign of the kasina and attending to the space left by that removal as infinite or boundless, in order to arouse the base of infinity of space. This mode of contemplation of space betrays the fact that space is also something made up or prepared, sankhata. Whatever is prepared, sankhata, is thought out and mind-made, abhisankhatam abhisanchetaitam. The Buddha proclaimed that there is only one asankhata, unprepared, that is Nibbāna. But later philosophers confounded the issue by taking space also to be asankhata. They seem to have ignored its relation to the mind in regarding causes and conditions as purely external things. Here we see the relativity between form and space. Like the picture and its background, form and space stand relative to each other. All this is presented to us by attention. Manasikara sambhava sabbe dhamma. All things originate from attention. Some of the later speculations about the nature of the space element are not in consonance with the basic principles outlined in the Dhamma. Such a confusion arose probably due to a lack of understanding of the term asankhata. Now, if we are to say something more about this particular discourse, what remains after detaching one's mind from these five elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, and space, is a consciousness that is extremely pure. The basic function of consciousness is discrimination. It distinguishes between the bitter and the sweet, for instance, to say this is bitter, that is sweet. Or else it distinguishes between the pleasant, the unpleasant, and the neutral with regard to feelings. This is pleasant, this is unpleasant, this is neither pleasant nor unpleasant. Now that the five elements, earth, water, fire, air, and space, which create discrete objects as the outward manifestation of consciousness, have been totally removed, the residual function of consciousness amounts to a discrimination between the three grades of feeling. The sage who has arrived at this stage of progress on the path to Nibbāna takes the next step by observing these three kinds of feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, and either pleasant nor unpleasant, as they arise and cease dependent on specific contacts, thereby gradually bringing the mind to equanimity. He brings his mind to a stage of radiant equanimity. But even this equanimity he does not grasp by way of methinking or imagining. The phrase used in this connection is visangyutto nang navedeti. Being detached, he does not experience it. There is a detachment and aloofness even in going through those sensations. This is clearly expressed in that context. For instance, in the case of a pleasant feeling, it is said, anicchāti pajanāti, anajjositati pajanāti, anabhinanditati pajanāti. He understands it to be impermanent, he understands it to be uninvolved, he understands it to be unrejoiced. With the understanding of impermanence, conceit goes down. The non-involvement does away with the bliss. The absence of rejoicing suggests the extinction of craving. So the attainment of arahanthood is in effect the cessation of that consciousness itself. That consciousness is divested of its most primary function of discriminating between the three grades of feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, and neither unpleasant nor pleasant. The term visaññutto connotes disjunction, suggestive of dispassion and detachment. In this way, the Dhātuvibhanga Sutta clearly brings out the relevance of the question of Maññana to the path leading to Nibbāna. In some contexts, this practice of desisting from me-thinking or imagining is called atammayata, non-identification. This is the term used by the Buddha throughout the Sappurisa Sutta of the Majjhima Nikāya. For instance, we read there, Sappurisoca ko bhikkave iti patisaṅcikkati neva saññānā saññāyatana samāpattiyāpi atammayata buddha bhagavata yena yena hi maññanti tato taṁ hoti aññathāti. The good man reflects thus. The principle of non-identification has been recommended by the Buddha even with regard to the attainment of the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. Thus, in whatever way they imagine about it, thereby it turns otherwise. The good man referred to here is the noble disciple on the supramundane path. This term tammaya needs to be clarified in order to understand the significance of this statement. It is derived from tadmaya, literally made of that or of that stuff. It is on a par with such terms as sovannamaya, golden, and rajatamaya, silvery. When one has cravings, conceits, and views about something, he practically becomes one with it due to that very grasping. In other words, he identifies himself with it. That is why the person who has imaginings about the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, which he has attained, thinks, I am one who has the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. He thereby has conceit, which is a defilement in itself. As a result, when he loses his mastery of that attainment, he becomes disconcerted. It is for that reason that the Buddha has enjoined that one should cultivate the attitude of atammayata or non-identification even with regard to the attainment of the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. The Arahant is called atammayo in the sense that he does not identify himself with anything. An Arahant cannot be identified with what he appears to possess. This is well expressed by the following verse in the Devaduta Vagga of the Anguttara Nikāya. Pasaiya marang abhibhuya antakang yocha phusi jatikkhayang padhanava so tadiso loka vidu sumedho sabbesu dhammesu atammayo muni. That ardent sage who has studied the extinction of birth, having overpowered Mara and conquered the Ender, that such like one, the wise sage, the knower of the world, is aloof in regard to all phenomena. The idea of this aloofness can be presented in another way, that is, as the detachment from the seen, the heard, the sensed, and the cognized, ditta sutta mutta viññāta. One of the most important suttas that merits discussion in this respect is the Bāhya Sutta in the Bodhivagga of the Udāna. It is generally acclaimed as an extremely profound discourse. The ascetic Bāhya Daruciriya comes all the way from far off Supparaka to see the Buddha. When he reaches Jetavana monastery at Savatthi, he heard that the Buddha had just left on his arms round. Due to his extreme eagerness, he ran behind the Buddha and, on meeting him, fell prostrate before him and begged, "May the Exalted One preach to me the Dhamma." The Buddha, however, seemed not so responsive when he remarked, "Now it is untimely Bāhya, we are on our arms round." Some might be puzzled by this attitude of the Buddha, but most probably it is one of those skillful means of the Buddha suggestive of his great compassion and wisdom. It served to tone down the over-enthusiastic haste of Bāhya and to arouse a reverential respect for the Dhamma in him. Bahya repeated his request for the second time, adding, I do not know whether there will be a danger to the Exalted One's life or to my own life. For the second time, Buddha refused. It was when Bahya made his request for the third time that the Buddha acceded to it by giving a terse discourse, Sankhitta Dhammadesana, of extraordinary depth. The exhortation, brief and deep as it is, was quite apt, since Bahya Dharacharya belonged to that rare category of persons with quick understanding, Khippa Bhinya. Tasmat yate bahya evang sikhitabang ditthe dittamattang bhavisati sute sutamattang bhavisati mute mutamattang bhavisati viññāte viññātamattang bhavisati evang hi te bahya sikhitabang yato kho te bahya ditthe dittamattang bhavisati sute sutamattang bhavisati mute mutamattang bhavisati viññāte viññātamattang bhavisati tato tvang bahyena tena yato tvang bahyena tena tato tvang bahyena tattha yato tvang bahyena tattha tato tvang bahyene vidha na hurang na ubhayamantare yesevanto dukkhassa. No sooner had the Buddha finished his exhortation than the ascetic Bahya attained arahanthood then and there. Let us now try to unravel the meaning of this abstruse discourse. The discourse starts off abruptly as if it has been wrested from the Buddha by Bahya's repeated requests. Tasmat he Bahya evang sikhitabang. Well then, Bahya, you had better train yourself thus. And what is that training? In the seen there will be just the seen. In the heard there will be just the heard. In the sensed there will be just the sensed. In the cognized there will be just the cognized. Thus, Bahya, should you train yourself. It is as if the Buddha had addressed the ascetic Bahya in the terminology of the Aryans and established him on the path to Nibbāna. Here the term mutta, or sensed, stands for whatever is experienced through the tongue, the nose, and the body. The basic principle in this training seems to be the discipline to stop short at bare awareness, ditthe dittamattang, sute sutamattang, etc. The latter half of the discourse seems to indicate what happens when one goes through that training. The entire discourse is a presentation of the triple training of morality, concentration, and wisdom in a nutshell. And when to you, Bahya, there will be in the seen just the seen, in the heard just the heard, in the sensed just the sensed, in the cognized just the cognized, then Bahya, you are not by it. And when you are not by it, you are not in it. And when Bahya, you are not in it, then Bahya, you are neither here nor there nor in between. This itself is the end of suffering. As a literal translation, this appears cryptic enough to demand an explanation. Let us first of all give a few clues to unravel the puzzle. The terms by it, tena, and in it, tattha, are rather elliptical. Though unexpressed, they seem to imply the relevance of Ñāṇananda to the whole problem. As we happened to mention earlier, imaginings or methinkings by way of craving, conceit, and views leads to an identification for which the term used is tammyata. Such an identification makes one unsteady, for when the thing identified with is shaken, one also gets shaken up. This kind of imagining in terms of is indicated by the elliptical tena, for we get a clear proof of it in the following two lines from the Jara Sutta in the Atthaka Vagga of the Sutta Nipāta. Dhono nahi tena manyati yadidam dittha sutam mutesuva. Dhona is a term for the Arahant as one who has shaken off all defilements. So these lines could be rendered as follows. The Arahant, the one who has shaken off, does not imagine in terms of, that is to say, in terms of whatever is seen, heard, and sensed.